Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock and I declare this agenda forum open. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and their descendants. Item 2 is the disclaimer. Agenda forums are specifically for agenda items which are to be considered by Council at the next ordinary Council meeting. Agenda forums is not a decision-making forum. They provide an opportunity for councillors to be equally informed and seek additional information on matters prior to the presentation of such matters to the next ordinary meeting of Council for formal consideration and decision. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the Council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in the meeting during public question time or deputation time, it is assumed your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep all comments respectful to the Council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public are not captured. Item 3, attendance and apologies. We have several staff coming in via electronic means. Leave of absence is nil, and I have apologies from Councillor Kiley, Councillor Prodovnik and Councillor Richardson. Councillor Howard is delayed and will be attending as soon as she can. Are there any others, Mr CEO, that you're aware of?
No other apologies, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of financial and proximity interests or interests affecting impartiality. Are there any councillors received any, Mr CEO? No. Thank you. Item 5, public question time, questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. Item 5.1, questions of which due notice has been given. There were nil. Item 5.2, questions without notice. Does anyone in the public gallery wish to ask a question on the items contained within the agenda? Being no, we'll move to item 6, which is reports and notices of motions, and 6.1, additional information from the officers. There is nil. It takes us to item 6.2, deputations. And in accordance with the current procedures for public participation agenda forums, all requests for in-person deputations and submissions of written deputations were required by 3 p.m. Tuesday the 26th of April. All written deputations received by 5 p.m. Tuesday the 26th have been circulated with the preliminary agenda last evening, and additional deputation requests have been approved and are included. All written deputations received prior to the agenda forum are attached for councillors' information. In Part A, there were nil. In Part 2, I start with item 4.2, proposed amendment number 1 of the Henley Brook local planning structure to generally add an additional public primary school and amend POS 10, multiple properties in Henley Brook. It's on page 115 of your, 155 of your agenda, councillors. And I have an in-person deputation from Mr Tim Dawkins from Urbis supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Mr Dawkins. If you can come to the microphone, push your talk button until the red light comes on. Once you start speaking, you'll have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you mind if I take my mask off to speak?
I don't mind. Does anyone in the public gallery mind? There's no indication of any issue, so you can take your...
Sorry, I do, Mr Mayor.
Okay. You do?
No problem.
Okay, I've got objections. If you can just speak clearly.
That's fine. I'll give
when
it a
you
go.
have a minute left, I'll advise you of that. Thank you.
Dear Mayor and Councillors, thanks for your time this evening. My name is Tim Dawkins. I'm a Director at Urbis, and I'm here in relation to item 4.2, proposed amendment 1 to the Henley Brook local structure plan. We would also like to thank the planning officers who are here and the ones that aren't, who have taken the time, in progressing this amendment and preparing the agenda item. We have no conjecture with the information as has been presented in the agenda, so I will be reasonably brief. The amendment is being undertaken by Urbis on behalf of the Department of Education to facilitate the development of a third primary school in the Henley Brook local structure plan area. The structure plan area is the subject site is located in the southern end of the structure plan area and is proposed to be co-located with public open space, which has been slightly relocated from the original structure plan. Specifically speaking, this amendment proposes to rezone lots 52 and 53 to public purpose primary school and relocate public open space number 10 to be wholly within lot 51. The driver for this additional primary school is to deliver educational capacity to the rapidly expanding northeast corridor of Perth. This amendment is a key part of the Department of Education's remit of providing primary school education in the growing metropolitan area and acting where the need arises to adjust their plans. The Department of Education has identified the need due to the higher than previously anticipated dwelling yields in Brabham. Considering recognising the school enrolment catchment area is broader than the structure plan area, some of the catchment does indeed come from outside the LSP area. However, the LSP area does exceed the threshold rates under the local Department of Planning's policy DC 2.4, exceeding 1,500 dwellings per school site in the structure plan area. In adopting the original structure plan, the Statutory Planning Committee of the WAPC acknowledged the potential for a future modification to the structure plan to include a third primary school should the need emerge, and should the Education Department be able to acquire suitable land for such use. Specifically, the resolution was, number 4, advise the Department of Education that should land be acquired for a primary school in the southwestern area of the local structure plan area, near Park Street and the extension of Partridge Avenue, then the Commission would be supportive of an amendment to the approved LSP. The Department of Education has obviously subsequently acquired those lots. The Department of Education has also been in ongoing discussions with the WAPC as the owner of the public open space 10, POS 10, site, and has arrived at the conclusion to upgrade the POS to an oval category, which has previously been limited to passive recreation and drainage. This proposal represents a significant improvement whereby the oval will be provided for a shared use for the school and for the wider community outside of school hours. It is acknowledged that this is addressed in the officer's report, and we're supportive and agreeing to it. We welcome the officer's acceptance of their assessment of this and the recommendation for approval based on the demonstrated benefits of the third school site and the functionality that will flow to the City of Swan community. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillors, of Mr Dawkins? Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. Who's going to actually create the oval, the public open space?
Well, the Department of Education will pre-fund that. So it'll happen concurrently with the school as part of the same development application.
And that will be built or it will be constructed, laid out at the same time as the school will
Correct,
be.
yes. And because the school, it's the school's oval as well, so they're acknowledging the fact that they would have to do a junior oval normally. This is a bigger oval, so they would pre-fund it, but part of it will come back through the WPC.
All right then. Is it going to be the community are going to share that space?
Yes, that's right.
Oval, all right.
So normally a school site needs to be 4 hectares. This is 3.5, but has additional, so it's bigger in total because it's sharing the oval.
Okay. I don't know if you can answer this, but we've had a number of school ovals that were supposed to be shared in Beachborough, fenced recently. So, what kind of sort of conditions or what kind of guarantees can be put in place that this oval doesn't end up being fenced some years down the track? Are you able to answer anything like that at the moment?
I'm afraid I can't answer the first part of the question, but I can offer to get you some advice through the Department of Education on that. But for this site, 2 of the lots are going to be reserved for the school, and one lot, a third of the site will be reserved for public open space. And so there'll be an agreement around how they get shared. So it certainly will be a formal agreement, and that won't be fenced to prevent
the agreement will be with the city, is it?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll take that up later.
Councillor Bowman, you're next. Thank you.
Just a quick one. With the majority of the children apparently will be coming from south of Park Street, do you think there's a need for safe passage of students crossing Park Street?
Look, I suspect so. That's the Department of Education thing. My young kids cross busy roads where there's crossing guards. That's not a planning consideration, but I'm sure there will be facilities put in place.
Any other questions? Thank you, councillors. Then I thank you for your presentation,
Thank you very
Mr
much.
Dawkins. Thank you. There is a written deputation, councillors, from Miss Sue Manning on the same item, and you should have received that last night or this evening. That takes us to the next item, item 4.6, single house and animal establishment dog kennel, lot 1, Old West Road, Bullsbrook. It's on page 367, and the first in-person deputation is Mrs. Leanne Bosner. Mrs. Bosner, thank you. You can come up to the microphone, push your speak button, and once you start speaking, you'll have 5 minutes, thank you. And I'll try and tell you when you have a minute left. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors and City of Swan staff. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of that live around Old West Road, Bullsbrook. It's a rural area. Some are on large lots, some are on small lots, and the dog kennel is going to be situated in the middle of us. There's only a smaller portion of people, 5 or 6 people, that will be affected, negatively affected by the noise of dogs barking. We feel that the rural zoning, the general rural zoning is it doesn't meet the requirements of the general rural zoning. General Rural Zoning 3 says ensures the use and development of land does not prejudice rural amenities and to promote the enhancement of rural character. These dog kennels, the rural character may be not affected, but the prejudice of rural amenities is affected because we are outdoors people. Our rural amenities will be prejudiced. Apart from the fact that our housing value will go down, we will have trouble selling our house because we've got dog kennels right next door to us. I keep horses on my property. I spend a lot of time outdoors. The dog barking during the day will affect me. I personally find it quite emotional having dogs barking, hearing the dogs barking are quite close. I mean, they say it's 250 metres away, but in a rural area, 250 metres isn't really that far. And plus the kennels are closer. So this noise is unacceptable to us, and it will affect us mentally and emotionally. Our bedroom window actually faces the property. We will never be able to sleep with our windows open ever again because of the dog kennels across from us. We feel that dog kennels should be thought ahead of. Industrial areas, dog kennels should be in industrial areas. I have examples of dog kennels in industrial areas. A lot of pounds are put in industrial areas. Gosnells, Stirling, Perth, Fremantle, Canning Vale, Armidale, City of Swan all have their pounds located in industrial areas. The RSPCA is an industrial area, and there's a dog refuge home that is situated in industrial areas. These are only a few. I googled a whole bunch of them. There's more than that are situated in industrial areas because it's an industrial noise. As the councillors are here to provide for the future of the City of Swan, and setting aside areas for dog kennels would be appropriate, considering that in Bullsbrook there's going to be thousands of acres that are set aside for industrial area. There are some rural properties that are close to these industrial areas that may be closer to to the highway that is possible to set aside for dog facilities. There's a lot of urbanisation coming into the area. Where we are, we're very close to Wanneroo. That's all getting urbanised. There's going to be people pushing out towards us. There's dog kennels over there that maybe have to be relocated in the near future. So if you think ahead, if you planned a zone which would allow for dog kennels, then everybody wins. We'd also like to talk about the clearing that is involved with the building of these kennels. It's a lot of bushland there. We have there's a degree of ambiguity of whether or not the dog training fields can be cleared of bushland without clearing permit from Department of Water and Environmental Regulations, because they're allowed to clear for buildings, but they're going to clear quite a few acres of land for the training fields, and that needs to be taken into consideration. We also have regular visits from the Carnaby cockatoos, which are
1 minute
endangered
left,
species,
thank you.
And they travel through our property. We don't know whether or not the clearing of the bushland will affect their breeding, feeding, breeding and feeding of environment. We also have the long-necked turtle, which uses the property next door for their possibly laying eggs. In the conclusion, the dog kennels will infringe on our right to enjoy our lifestyle and will prejudice our amenities. The clearing of land needs to be addressed, and the Carnaby cockatoo habitat may potentially be destroyed. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, councillors. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, my question is, in the report it says that the building could be constructed to be appropriately noise insulated, or that's a requirement. Would that satisfy your concerns about noise?
For the building? Possibly the noise at night, but there's also daytime noise, dogs barking during the day, and 50 dogs, we don't have a guarantee that there's only going to be 50 dogs there. So there's a possibility, a tin wall is not going to be a sound barrier for 50 dogs barking. I know the applicant has put in things in place to lessen the dogs barking, but dogs going out into an exercise yard, 50 dogs going out into an exercise yard which is open, is not going. How's that going to be? That's as bad as the inside the kennel. The noise, it's actually probably worse, because if you think about a dog coming out from being locked in a kennel, going out and seeing other dogs, the noise would be actually louder.
Any other? Councillor Henderson, thank you.
Thank you. Between your place and the proposed facility where the training in particular is going to occur, because it's going to be...
Sorry, I can't hear, sorry.
Between your place and where the training in particular is going to occur, that's outdoors, of course, and the sound will travel, is there much vegetation between you?
Yes,
and
it's
that
full
area?
of vegetation.
So that at the moment...
You can't even walk through it. There's little paths going through it, but
Yeah.
it's full of vegetation.
So you're of the view that the sound will travel through that?
Well, they'll have to clear a lot of it,
Hmm.
and yes, it does. We live a kilometre from the maze. There's lots of vegetation between us and the maze, and we can hear that. We live a kilometre from the training grounds, the bombing range. When they start with their rifles, we can hear that. We can hear the highway, which is 8 kilometres away.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Then I thank you for your attendance and
Thank
your
you.
deputation. And the next person giving an in-person deputation, Mr. Edward Bosnar. Thank you. If you can come, you'll have, up to the microphone, you'll have 5 minutes also, and if I could ask you not to repeat anything we've just heard. Thank you.
So, evening, Mayor, councillors and CS1 staff. My name's Eddie Bosnar, I'm Leanne's husband, and we are the owners of Residence A and B, which are the closest to the proposed kennels on Lot 102, West Coast, Old West Road, DA 1109-2. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents within the acoustic report. The issue I would like to bring up is, in the meeting of council on the 4th of May, it was resolved that no more than 50 dogs are permitted on the property at any one time, and no more than 3 dogs are permitted in any of the training fields at any one time. How is this to be policed? If the applicant states that he has 50 boarding dogs in kennels, and he also does personal training sessions where owners will bring their respective dogs for training sessions, hence there may be at any one time well over 50 dogs on the property. Hence the acoustic report I feel is incorrect. The use of tin fencing is a good containment barrier, however does little, if anything, to contain the noise. As we were talking about the acoustic barriers, if it did, why won't we use tin fencing for our highway barriers? It's always concrete barriers. So our proposal is, if the amenities were to go ahead, which we do oppose, the tin fencing around the kennels and the training yards need to be upgraded to a more suitable acoustic barrier, such as concrete panelling, brick or limestone walls of a minimum of about 2 metres high. The closer the walls to the sound source, the more effective it becomes. As most of the residents are rural properties, we spend most of our time outside, as Leanne said, and we enjoy the peace and quiet we have at the moment. And we request a remodelling of the proposal as to not affect our mental health with the undesired noise of barking dogs, which personally I find more annoying than even a baby crying. If you look at the site plans we have handed out to you, there's a proposal for the training areas marked in yellow, and the walls surrounding the kennels marked in pink highlighter. We request that these be upgraded to concrete panelling or equivalents. We also request that the walls in pink be higher and have a sound-absorbing barrier. And also the anti-com they use in the kennels, we request that be of the highest possible rating, i.e. about 130 mil is what you can get. That's our request. Thank you. Any questions on that?
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? No questions. I thank you for your attendance and your deputation. And the next deputation is by Mr Jake Kenny in support of the application. Thank you, Mr Kenny. You'll also have 5 minutes, and I'll try and give you a warning when you've used 4 of those minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with regards to my application tonight. Should this application be approved, it will provide enormous benefits to the local community. There is a large percentage of dogs out there that are either not under effective control or have behavioural problems. These behavioural problems can result in some seriously devastating outcomes. The behavioural problems result in the community from a large range of issues. These can be neighbour disputes as a result of these behavioural problems, dogs with aggression issues towards children with sometimes possible devastating outcomes, dog fights at dog parks and assaults occurring as a result of these things happening. The list goes on and on. What makes these matters worse is the fact that there is a large percentage of dog owners in today's society that are time poor. Being time poor means that conventional dog training lessons are ineffective to rectify these issues. Dogs learn by repetition, and therefore if the owners don't have the time to put in the required repetition, the issues are no longer able to be fixed, and the issues get larger and larger as a result. However, there is a solution. Should this application be approved, it will give the local community and members of the public access to an intensive training approach which allows them to rectify these issues without the need to invest time themselves. This will provide an enormous benefit to the local community and stop these massive range of issues occurring within our society. With regards to the benefits to the community, what I've also supplied with my application is a large range of testimonials stating that dogs who once were aggressive towards children no longer are, dogs who once had posed a significant bite risk to people and other dogs no longer do, and a large number of clients who once upon a time didn't have effective control now do, and the massive benefit that has brought both themselves, their families and the local community as a result. Having said that, and talking about all the benefits, something that is extremely important to me is that to not negatively impact anyone in any way, shape or form. That's the reason why I've gone to an enormous amount of effort to be able to stand in front of you today and give you a personal and professional guarantee that should this application be approved, it will not negatively impact anyone in any way, shape or form. Extensive acoustic reports have been submitted from leading professionals which show even on a worst case scenario, all noise regulations will be complied with and some. The design of the facility has been done in such a way to negate any potential issues occurring. And not only can I sit here and give you a personal and professional guarantee, I can also give you a proven track record, given the fact that this business is a current operating and approved business within the City of Wanneroo currently, and has been for the last 6 years without a single issue or complaint raised. Also in support of my application today, I have given letters of support from every adjoining landowner at my current facility, stating that the business does not impact them in any way, shape or form, despite being significantly closer than this application, and also confirming that they believe that the benefit that the services I provide within my business are enormous to the community, some of which are speaking firsthand, and I've helped rectify issues with their respective dogs. This application will not negatively impact anyone in any way, shape or form, and will only provide a massive benefit to the community. The other point that I would like to address tonight is I note that the City's staff has recommended refusal of the colour-bond fencing around the external boundary of the property. What I would like to respectfully request is that this colour-bond fence is considered by yourselves. Colour-bond fencing provides a range of benefits that Post and Wire, as recommended by the City, cannot provide. These benefits include deterring local wildlife from entering the property, namely, to be honest with you, I'm thinking...
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
Thank you. Namely, I'm thinking of snakes, which pose a significant risk to the dogs. Colour-bond fencing will contain an animal a lot more effectively than a post and wire will as well. And also it adds the added benefit of the dogs not being able to see external motivators such as local wildlife, adjoining landowners, animals, whether that's horses, sheep or dogs or otherwise. And without these visibility, the dog's going to be a lot less inclined to get away from the property as well. The other point that I'd like to make is that I have written a submission with a potential solution of erecting that colour-bond fence but inside the property and running a large screening barrier around. Personally, I feel that this would provide all the adequate advantages of colour-bond fencing whilst also not deterring from the rural characteristics of the area. Please allow me to help those members of the public that need this and potentially have very dangerous situations that can be rectified. Thank you very much for your time and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Bowman first.
Can you just explain to me about when the dogs are at the kennels? I read in the report and the application. Am I correct in my understanding that the dogs are always in the kennels except for that little area when they're getting cleaned out or when they're getting trained?
That's correct.
And so how many times a day would they be outside in the training area?
Look, to be honest with you, I can't really give you a specific times of the day. It depends on the severity of the issue with the dog. It depends on how many dogs are currently under that facility. The 50 dogs on that facility are the absolute max, so I can't really give you an indication. What I can tell you at my current facility, where I complete the same service, the dogs would get out probably 5 or 6 times a day.
And so what, 10 minutes at a time or?
Potentially, yeah. Potentially. Okay. Some of them would be very short. If I've got a younger dog in, they can't obviously concentrate for the length of time an adult can, so that would be a short duration. Otherwise, sometimes they're potentially longer.
So be fair on average that there's about an hour for each dog each day?
Currently, but I'm running on a much lower scale. So obviously, at the moment, I don't employ staff. I will be employing staff and residents of the city, should this application be approved. But that would be I couldn't really give you a definite time, but that would be a potential average.
The reason I asked the question is with 50 dogs and 3 training fields, there's 17 rotations, which over 30 minutes is 8.5 hours. And so that's already 8.5 hours done.
Correct.
So if they go for an hour, there's 17 hours in a day just to get that amount. My other question is, what was the reason you chose the location of the house?
From an acoustic standpoint, so I was advised by the acoustic consultant that would be a good location of the house, to be honest with you. But also, it wasn't a major sort of consideration in regards to a particular area as such, to be honest with you.
So you've chose to build the house the spot where it was the most acoustic desirable from the kennels?
From the consultant, yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Councillor Johnson, you're next, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How many dogs would be outside at any one time?
In the training fields?
Yeah.
3. 3 absolute max with 3 staff, so 1-to-1 ratio.
And from your experience with your current facilities, is that roughly the same number? Do you typically have 3 outside?
No, I have 1 currently, so I don't employ staff currently.
So, and with the 1 dog that you have outside, do the dogs typically bark when they're being trained?
No, because they're being engaged with, so you'll find obviously dogs are normally going to bark when they're not being engaged with. It's a very rare occurrence that a dog's going to be barked while training. Having put that into my submission as well with the standard operating practices, if a dog was to bark, that would be rectified by the trainer. If it was unable to be rectified, that dog would be placed back into the kennel building where the barking can be tamed, and therefore the attempt would be done at a later time.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I think you said you had another facility at the moment, is that right?
That's correct.
Is that in a rural area as well?
It's in its own special rural currently.
And what sort of distances to other houses?
The closest resident to my current kennel would be about 30 metres, I believe. I've submitted with those letters of support, there's a map that shows every local adjoining landowner and actually has the distances from every local adjoining landowner on it. I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you, but yeah, the closest would be 30 metres. All of them are within about 60.
Right, and have you received any complaints from your current operation?
No complaints at all in the last 6 years of being approved with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Then I also thank you for your attendance and your deputation.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bowman. Question of staff.
It was regarding the clearing and whether it's exempt for the training areas.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've endeavoured to clarify that question by contacting the Department of Water, Environment and Regulation, and in the end we got a somewhat equivocal response where the question was whether or not the clearing of the outdoor training areas that are proposed to be fenced would constitute structures for the purpose of the exemption in the relevant legislation. And what was offered by the departmental staff was, as I said, somewhat equivocal. They indicated it could be taken as not constituting structures, but in the same token they've indicated that structures can include areas such as car parking. So unfortunately it is unclear as to whether or not that agency would grant an exemption for clearing or not, but what is certain is that the obligation resides with the proponent to, if in doubt, apply and either obtain the clearance or get confirmation of the exemption, and that obligation will reside with the proponent, and the staff of DUA made that clear. They agree that that obligation resides with the proponent.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. My question is to Mr Russell. Just reading recommendation, the officer's recommendation 2.5. The kennel building is to be constructed so as to achieve the noise levels estimated to be received from noise generated by dogs inside, as per the acoustic assessment prepared by Herring Storer Acoustics. I don't quite understand that. So the kennel building is to be constructed so as to achieve the noise levels estimated to be received. So it's to achieve the noise levels estimated to be received. That's the part I don't quite understand. Can you explain that?
Can you just give the page and paragraph number?
As I understand it,
it's 376.
3 years. I understand it. This is recommendation 2 on page 376. This is condition 5.
Correct.
Okay. So what happens there is that the acoustic report indicates that you should be able to generate. Or is modelled that you will generate within that building certain noise levels, okay, subject to the properties of insulation of the materials. What we're saying is that when you build all of this, that you're able, or as per the report, you're able to construct to the standard, build to the standard that will achieve the modelled noise levels that the acoustic assessment estimates will be received from inside that, from an outside point from noise generated within that building.
That clarified the question, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, it does. I guess the question is why the noise level is not actually in the recommendation. So then it would be a bit less ambiguous.
Mr Russell, thank
Mr
you.
Mayor, well, the acoustic report is going to makes the contention you will receive noise levels X based on certain properties of insulation from the construction of the building. So what we're saying around all of that, okay, is that you ensure that you construct that building so that you will actually ensure that the received noise levels extraneous to that building will match what the acoustic modelling has estimated.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Henderson.
In a similar vein, we're going to have an expert review the design and understand what noise attenuation we would expect, particularly around the fact that you're going to require ventilation and you're going to require some way of keeping it relatively cool for the animals. There's lots of room for things to go wrong here.
Mr Russell.
Provided you construct it with a certain roof material, a certain building facade material and with other spray painted insulation, that the acoustic assessment is saying that you're going to achieve those levels. I don't think it's getting down to the micro level detail around. It's based on those fundamental components of construction, not the level of working out various openings or other bits and pieces of certain widths, etc. So what we're looking at is just to, when the building plans come in, that as per the acoustic assessment, the roof is made of X, the walls are made of Y, and you've sprayed insulation material Z on them. That's all we're looking at, Mr. Mayor.
Anything further, Councillor Henderson? Well, okay, well, perhaps we can take that up with staff during the week before we get to next week's. Councillor Johnson.
Just a further question, Mr. Russell. I'm just looking at page 404, and at the top there it's got table 6.3, scenario 3. Now, if I look at the accessible noise level, it says 52 decibels. I think that's 52 decibels just there. It's on the right-hand side. Am I reading that correctly? Is that decibels? So what's 52 decibels for the layperson? Is it the speech we're hearing now? Is this 52 decibels? Approximately 50 decibels?
Probably a bit lower in dating that space.
All right.
Can you comment or answer the question, Mr. Russell?
To be quite honest, Mr. Mayor, I couldn't quite hear all of Councillor Johnson's question. He might need to speak up a bit. Maybe
can you up your decibels, please, Councillor Johnson?
I was just asking Mr. Russell. Am I speaking at about 52 decibels right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm afraid I'm not a environmental scientist. I'm not able to comment as to precisely what level 52 decibels is. I don't know whether the proponent has their acoustic consultant in the room who might be able to answer that, and unfortunately I don't know whether Mr. Bishop is online. He might be able to assist with that, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Bishop is online, so we'll just...
Thank you, Councillor Henderson, for your techno information. Mr. Bishop, can you take it any further? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the question was around, if I heard it correctly, sort of around 50 decibels, around equal to people speaking in a room. Was that the question?
52 decibels.
52 decibels. Look, I'm just looking at the page. So that page there, page 403, was it?
404.
404.
It's the top table on page 404, thank you.
Yeah, okay, so that's an L max reading, so that's the maximum level. So yes, it's difficult to compare exactly to speaking, but depends. I'm assuming the best way to describe it, from a quiet sort of like a whisper, you're down around 30 decibels. A normal conversation can be up to sort of 60 decibels. So it's within that sort of range, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Any other questions, councillors? Then I'll just... yes, Councillor Catalano.
Might sound silly, but if there's like more than one person talking normally, then that, or let's say there's 10 people talking, does that raise the decibels? So it adds to it? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also bring your attention, there are 3 written deputations, one from Mr. Richard James, one from Mr. Jim Gellan, and a further one from Mr. Jake Kenny. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to Part C of the agenda and item C1.1. It's a notice of motion by Councillor Zanino, access track off Boulognese Drive in Brigadoon. It's on page 629, and the first in-person deputation is by Ms. Jessica Shaw. Thank you, Jessica. You'll have 5 minutes once you start speaking.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for considering...
Sorry. We've had an objection to people taking their masks off. So
okay. Sorry, I missed that. I wasn't here for the beginning.
That's fine.
So, no problem.
Thank you very much.
I just have to see through my fogged-up glasses. Thank you for considering our matter regarding safe access and egress on the Boulognese Drive right-of-way. I appear before you this evening in a private capacity and on behalf of my neighbours, whom you see here, from 28, 32, 36, 38, 40 and 74 Boulognese Drive. We are 6 of the 8 properties that rely on the right-of-way as our only means of access and egress. The other 2 of those 8 properties do not currently have homes built on them. The 4 properties that bear the main burden of the right-of-way, that is, that have the right-of-way physically located on their land, have existing alternative means of access and egress. I also like to mention that I've spoken this afternoon to the owner of number 58 Boulognese Drive, which is one of those burdened properties, with alternative access onto Boulognese Drive, who nonetheless who supports us and wishes to see the maintenance issues of the right-of-way resolved. We have sent councillors a presentation that outlines our situation, and you obviously have the officers' reports in front of you. There's just a few key points that I'd like to raise. Firstly, the Boulognese right-of-way was created in 1986 when the subdivision was created, so this is not new. We're not asking about changing or removing anyone's rights. This is simply about us being able to exercise rights that have existed since 1986 that enable us to access our homes and be safe within them. The city was the sole party in the title documents created in 1986 who, as a grantee, covenanted to fill in, consolidate and level off any holes or trenches made on the easement, to reinstate and make good the surface of the easement, and I quote from the documents directly. So whereas the title documents say that other properties in the city may use the right-of-way for access and egress, they expressly state that the City of Swan may also use the right-of-way, and again I quote, for the purposes of constructing, extending, maintaining or altering or improving any pathway or road in the affected land. So upon creation, the City of Swan installed a bitumised surface which has eroded over time but is still evident, and the city has also, as recently as this year, filled a number of holes along the right-of-way with bitumen. My neighbour Jan will discuss the maintenance by neighbours and by the city in a bit more detail, and she'll also talk to fire and safety risks. The city's maintenance has become less frequent as disputes have arisen over access and rights to maintain the right-of-way. It's now in a very poor and deteriorating state, and as the rains come, this will only worsen. Residents are now at severe risk in terms of fire escape and access to emergency services. So utilities, care and emergency services are also experiencing difficulties accessing the property. I mean ambulance, the City of Swan's own staff that have sought access particularly for rubbish removal, Western Power, Australia Post, Hills Gas, Telstra, Watercorp and Silverchain all now have trouble accessing the properties and their own assets located along the right-of-way. It needs immediate repairs for access, but obviously we also wish to address long-term access and maintenance. As I say, the City of Swan is the only right holder for both access and maintenance and is the party best positioned to assist residents to resolve this matter. We urgently seek the City's assistance to make the right-of-way usable in the short term and provide a proper road that secures safe access for properties. The City has, in the past, expressed a desire for unanimity about the easement and passed a resolution to that effect. But despite the best efforts of my neighbours, this has simply been impossible to achieve. Councillors, municipal authorities are granted powers over common use land and infrastructure for these very reasons, where a group of people have rights and only one option, but others stand in the way and resist the exercise of those rights. Councils in these circumstances are granted powers to act. The City can and should intervene to ensure that others' rights, including its own rights, are preserved and the safety of all residents is secured, and to uphold the conditions of the covenant that it agreed to back in 1986 and the rights that have existed ever since those properties were created. So we ask for your support to take immediate action to make the right-of-way usable, to set aside the old motion because it's simply void for frustration, to lead action to inform our common rights of access, and to create a permanent road in place of the right-of-way. I'd just like to thank those councillors who've been in touch since we sent the slide pack across to indicate that they intend to visit, have visited, and who want to understand our situation better. I strongly encourage you to do so, to understand the barriers that we face from a terrain perspective. And I'd just like to express our great appreciation for Councillor Zanino for his willingness to meet with us, his advocacy, and for bringing this matter to council.
That's your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Any questions, councillors? Being no questions, I thank you for your attendance and your deputation. And the next speaker on the same item is Mrs. Jan Clark. Thank you, Mrs. Clark. You'll have 5 minutes, and I'll try and tell you when you've got 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk this evening. I just want to explain some of the experiences we have had living on this track. My husband Brian and I purchased our property in 2004. After building our house, we have lived there permanently since December 2009. Our address is 38 Bullenay Drive, although originally it was a Campasic address. The access road was in a reasonable condition and was maintained by the council when we initially bought the land. We and our immediate neighbours had no reason to think that the council would discontinue maintaining the road. It is impossible for us to put in a driveway onto Campasic Road because of the very steep incline and rocky terrain. Several of our neighbours have a similar situation, and we have to rely on the track as our only route. After a few years of living here, or there, the road surface began to deteriorate, and several meetings between a group of property owners and council representatives were held when we requested ongoing road maintenance. Each time the council expressed a reluctance to do so. Brian and our adjacent neighbours created a crude grading apparatus which was towed periodically behind four-wheel drive vehicles to level out the eroded surface. They found that this could only be done when the ground was damp with after rain. The eastern end of the road near Bullenay Drive entrance was not graded the way they were doing it because of repeated hostility shown towards them by the property owners there. Their work did improve the quality of the road on the western half of the road, but only for very short periods. The road surface has deteriorated so much now that it is impossible for their amateur grading to make any improvement at all. Over the last year, each downpour of rain causes more damage as large potholes and gutters further develop. The very poor condition of the access road has created many problems. We don't invite friends and family to visit anymore unless they have a sturdy vehicle and the confidence to drive on such a bad road. General wear and tear on our vehicles is of great concern. We recently had an RAC mechanic attend our property and confirm that the road certainly would have a negative impact on our vehicles. Service vehicles are finding it difficult to attend. We have required Silver Chain nursing care in the past and ambulances to attend on several occasions, and extra support was provided by us for them to be able to negotiate the road. I just want to add a little bit more in that area. On reflection and feedback today, I'd like to say that the most pressing reason for council support in upgrading the road is connected to the health risks. You never know when an ambulance or other healthcare services may need urgent access. Not long after we moved to Brigadoon, our neighbour had a fatal heart attack, and the ambulance was slow in attending because they could not find the address. We have personally required an ambulance on 3 occasions.
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
And delay in attendance has occurred because of difficulties finding our property and driving on the rough track. It is impossible to provide first aid and also physical direction to the ambulance at the same time. It may also be impossible to provide verbal direction if performing CPR. Fortunately, our wonderful neighbour, who is a paramedic, assisted life-saving care on one occasion. If a badly injured or seriously ill patient was requiring a smooth ride out, it would not be possible. Last year, my ailing brother needed our help with daily living and lived with us for 3 months until he was admitted to aged care. Silver Chain care support was necessary, and the Silver Chain staff had lots of problems in the wet weather using the access road in their small vehicles. Silver Chain management advised me that they would send a letter of concern to the council, but I'm not sure if they did.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Have you got much more to go? Because you've had your 5 minutes.
About 2 lines.
Okay, I'll allow you to finish off. Thank you.
We had to meet Silver Chain on the road to give direction on how to negotiate the very large pothole full of water when they were attending. We were also very worried about fire safety, but I think Jessica has covered that very well. And yes, that's it. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Any questions, councillors? No questions? Oh, hang on. Sorry, of staff or of the Mrs. Clark?
Staff, yes.
Staff.
First.
Thank you. I've got questions of staff, so thank you for your attendance and your deputation. Councillor Johnson first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I do recall a while ago when I was questioning why we were building a road somewhere, I got told, well, basically we're a roads board. So I guess the question for me then is, why doesn't the city own this road and just asphalt it? Can the member of the staff advise?
Mr. Coaten, thank you.
Well, it's not actually a road reserve, it's private land, it's an easement on private land. It's what hindsight's a wonderful thing, and it's perhaps a good example of, some planning and subdivisional development at the time that wasn't as good as it perhaps could have been. But that's why.
Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question to Mr. Coden, if you don't mind. It says in the officer's comments some property owners have indicated they would like the city to undertake maintenance on the track, and others have indicated objection to such work. What is the percentage in regards to that as well? Who's for and who is against in regards to percentage, Mr. Mayor?
I don't have exact figures, but the majority would be in favour of maintenance, and my understanding is that it's only a very small number of people who are opposed to it.
Okay. And a follow-up question, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
It also states in the officer's comment, in the intervening years, the residents have been unable to agree on a proposal for the management of the access track. Can you further elaborate that, if you don't mind, Mr. Coden? It's a pretty broad statement, that's all.
With the, perhaps going back to the report from 2011, and at the time of doing that and some of the meetings that have been referenced, and I was involved in some of those, I do recall them, and there seemed to be, I guess, an expectation from among the group that they would be able to reach agreement in relation to an agreed position. So obviously that hasn't been able to occur for different reasons, but certainly at the time there was an expectation that the discussions that the residents would be able to reach some common ground. At the time there were some of them that had some different views, but so and so for a number of months there was some discussions and negotiations going on between the property owners, but unfortunately they were never able to reach common position.
And final question, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind. Can staff please advise how many private, or in the tens or hundreds, how many private tracks we have in the city of Swan, if you don't mind as well, please?
If you're not...
I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't want to misinform council by having a guess, but I would be sort of willing to say that there wouldn't be a lot in this situation where there's an easement over private property and it's the only point of access for this many properties.
The last part was if you could furnish that information to all councillors. Thank you. Mr Curtin.
I will attempt to, but it would be quite a large
task.
task to do that. So if it's important, we can dedicate some resources to it, but it will...
And don't worry about it, Mr Curtin, if that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Catalano.
Just one for Mr Curtin. Do you know why this easement was actually the city's responsibility, why they have an easement over this particular bit of private land?
Well, it was to provide access for those properties, so presumably at the time it was felt that the local government would be the best body to have that responsibility.
Okay. And what are the objections? Why are people objecting to it?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the residents, but I know anecdotally and historically when our staff have gone to do maintenance on the site on past occasions, there have been some people who haven't wanted any work done on their property. Some of the feedback that we've had, again, this is only anecdotal, is that people don't want the vehicles driving across their property. So.
Oh, I see. Okay, and finally, you say that regular maintenance, is that on a yearly basis, is it? And what does regular mean?
Yeah, if some gravel resheeting was done on the road, and if it was some gravel imported onto the road, then we would anticipate that perhaps an ongoing annual grading program would be sufficient for that road. There would be relatively low traffic volumes on it.
Okay, and all that's achievable for $15,000 per annum?
Yes, in that order of magnitude, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, councillors of staff? Councillor Congdon, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Curtin, could you give me what you think is a modern-day cost to bitumise that road?
We haven't done that estimate. If it was, we haven't done that estimate. If it was, I think if you go to the 2011 report, the estimate then was, from memory, I think $450,000. Yes, that's option one in the 2011 report, page 633. So that was based on the land being transferred to the city. So for constructing a sealed road, at that time, bearing in mind that's 11 years ago, so the cost would have increased since then.
Thanks, Mr Curtin. That's why I said a modern-day cost, because I couldn't reflect on that one going that long ago. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Mr Curtin, you said transferred, so I guess you're suggesting at no cost. If there were a couple of owners, or one in particular, that didn't want to transfer it and we had to resume that half of the block that goes into the middle of the road, what sort of cost would that amount to, do you think?
Well, again, I wouldn't want to speculate. We'd have to get a valuation. The discussions at the time in 2011 with the owners were that most of them were, or a number of them were, willing to cede that land to the city free of charge. So if the city had to go and buy some of them, and presumably it may need to be by a compulsory acquisition if the people don't want to sell, we'd need to obtain a valuation at that time, but we haven't done that work.
Councillor Johnson.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, so what was the cost again in 2011 for asphalting? It was $450,000?
To construct a sealed road, a proper road, was, on page 633, so a sealed road was an estimated cost of $450,000 at that time, but that didn't include any land costs. That was on the basis that the land was all ceded free of charge.
And what's the longevity of an asphalt road, sealed road? How many years does it last for?
Well, the one like that with low traffic volumes would typically, the resealing, perhaps might need to be every 15 years or so, but it would be relatively maintenance free.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Henderson.
Mr Curtin, we wouldn't asphalt a road like that, would we? It would only be bitumised, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It would be a sealed, chip-sealed road, presumably, yeah.
Thank you, councillors, for your questions. That takes us to the next. There's also a written deputation from Mrs. Jan Clark. I draw to your attention, would have been in your package. That takes us to the next item, which is a confidential item. So at this stage, I'm looking for a motion, councillors, to go behind closed doors. Moved Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor Zanino. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried. Read out the items as per on your run sheet. If you have a question, please raise it with staff. If you are thinking of putting an alternative or an amendment in, please let us know. So, item 13.6, asset management strategy. Item 2.1, policy review, stakeholder and community engagement. 2.2, policy review, leasing and licensing of community facilities. Councillor Bowman.
So just my question, and I've submitted some of these already. I don't see that the policy is providing any direction, but it talks about in the report about, and hopefully I'm on the right one, I was off a little bit last night. It talks about reductions to fees and charges. Is that just a bad choice of words, and it's actually reduction to the lease amounts? Because I couldn't work out how there was a delegation for that, for fees and charges, but I can see how there is for lease and licence amounts.
Mr. Coaten, thank you.
I think that would be a bad choice of words.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Catalano.
The question is, is this the one that's going to govern how much people are paying to use the facilities and their access to the facilities? Because it seems to me the big problem is accessing and the fees.
Thank you, Mr. Coaten.
No, I think you're probably referring to the fees and charges for the majority of the city's buildings, and no, this isn't. This doesn't apply to that. This is for groups that have exclusive use of facilities. It doesn't apply to the normal booking system.
Thank you.
Should that be made clear in the policy at all? Because it doesn't seem to be clear to me, but should it be made clear in the policy that that's what it relates to?
Well, it does mention that it's talking about leasing and licensing, which is different to
hiring.
Casual bookings, hiring a facility.
Item 3.1, development of e-petitions page on the City of Swan website. 3.2, enforcement of Ackroyd parking on private land. 3.3, homelessness in the City of Swan update. Councillor Henderson. So you're going to move an amendment? Thank you. I've noticed Councillor Bowman's already put in a notice. Perhaps if you can communicate and work together. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Bowman.
I don't know which way to look, so I'll just look anywhere. Swan Districts, the old Swan District Hospital. Has any discussions been had there to further progress that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that that's still tied up in SWALS negotiations. Yep.
Thank you. Item 3.2, provision of home support service for frail, aged and young people with disabilities. Sorry?
Are you talking about questions or withdrawing?
Both.
Possibly withdrawing.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. If you can liaise with staff and get some advice. And thank you. Item 4.1, consideration of submission, update to aircraft noise special control mapping.
Yes.
Councillor Catalano. Item 5.2, proposed amendment to Henley Brook local structure plan and generally the additional public primary school with multiple properties in Henley Brook. Question, Councillor Catalano.
What are the chances of getting into this proposal the conditions around the public open space being for the use of the community, like forever, as opposed to for a couple of decades and then that gets fenced off, as has happened in Beachborough.
I think.
Is there any chance of that happening at this stage?
Well, I think we enter into a deed of dual use with the Education Department. The schools you're referring to in Beachborough had standalone premises with no dual reciprocational rights, and as such they fenced their school ovals off because we didn't have that mutual agreement in years gone past, Councillor.
Okay, so the question is this going to have that deed?
That was my understanding from the
so
presentation.
that's the question I have. Is it going to have this deed?
Mr van der Linde?
Yes. So the shared use agreements are standard with those. The other thing that I think is important to realise here is that the public open space, the new public open space things that's incorporated with the school, 3/4 of that public open space is on the lot that is currently owned by the WAPC. The WAPC has indicated in their comments on the developer contribution plan for the area which is coming back to the council next month, that they would like to be, they want the money back that they paid for that land through the DCP. So the DCP, the land will be a contribution within the DCP, so therefore can anticipate that that land should then be ceded to the city as public open space. Or you need to get a management order which opens it up and it doesn't make it part of the school site. So in that instance, we will control the things that are not the school. But that is sort of control.
Are you talking about as part of the DCP? The school doesn't have DCPs, do they?
It will be the DCP, and then once you pay them back, we can enter into that deed to get the land ceded to the city, because it's the developers then paid for it.
We have to pay back. Who do we pay back? And who's paid us some money? Is that?
So at the moment, before this structure, that public open space thing was located further.
Yes, that's correct.
That public open space in the current DCP is what was advertised is an shared infrastructure item towards which everyone is contributing. So that land is just, the POS has moved to this site, that everyone will still pay for it. So what they then pay for it, instead of going to the public landowner, the WAPC is the landowner of that site. So the money will go back to them.
So the city is going to get the DCP money and pay the WAPC for the public open space. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Aylett.
Mr Mayor, this is for Jim Coton, I think. On page 162, the traffic considerations, it talks about reclassifying the local street north of the school and providing a dual-use path and on-street parking, and about a roundabout treatment. Is that something that the council would have to fund, or would that be something the state government would fund as part of this proposal?
I'll let Mr Russell answer that one. It's his report.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I was just discussing with my colleague. Did I hear the councillor's question correctly, that it was who's going to pay for the construction of the roundabout at the junction of the road, the corner there? Our meetings with the Education Department preparatory to them ultimately lodging a development application was that would be a work that they would do, because they're actually looking at constructing the road. So our understanding at this point is that they will be fully funding that infrastructure.
So the roundabout and the dual-use path with on-street parallel parking.
Through Mr Mayor, I don't believe, my recollection is there was certainly discussion around the roundabout. I don't know we looked at the full treatment of any of the road treatment, but if there's a dual-use path is part of the access road, then it's reasonable to expect that will be part and parcel of what the Department of Education will construct as part of the development application.
Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to Item 4.3, Responsible Authority Report, change of use showrooms and gym at Tavern in Lloyd Street, Midland, and Councillor Bowman. You've already withdrawn that item, or do you have a question? Thank you. Or if you can discuss that together. Thank you, councillors.
We also have Prodovnik on that one, Mr Mayor. She's indicated.
Just advise that Councillor Prodovnik raised an issue, so perhaps if you can include her with your discussions. Item 4.4, proposal for use of portion of existing shed coffee roasting, food and beverage production, Nangao Road, Lexia. Yes, you can ask questions now, thank you.
My question is, the business currently exists roasting coffee. Are they doing it? Do they own the restaurant on that site as well? Is that? Do we know that?
Mr. Russell, when you're ready.
Through Mr Mayor, I understand that they're separate business entities.
Okay, so when I look at the picture on the plan, it shows it shows like a front door that doesn't match the plan. So it looks to me like it's. I noticed in Councillor Bowman's questions that. I suppose my question is, it's a different. The people who own the restaurant are different to the people that have put in this shed use.
Thank you. Item 4.5, unauthorised patio transportable structure and home business, Huntsman Terrace in Jane Brook. Item 4.6, single house and animal establishment, Old West Road, Bullsbrook. Councillor Bowman, you've withdrawn that item. Item 4.7, removal of lawn and concrete in the lawn area for vehicle parking, Camboon Road, Malaga.
An amendment.
So, Councillor Congdon, you'll be moving an amendment. Thank you. Item 4.8, proposed outbuilding within the asset protection zone, variation provision of local development plan, Stark Turn in Allenbrook. Councillor Henderson, you're withdrawing that item?
I've got a couple of questions.
Thank you.
This is probably of Phil. The issue here is the shed isn't going to be inhabited. I guess it's not going to be inhabited. So are there different rules around fire assessment where a building is inhabited or not?
Through Mr Mayor, yes, the planning for bushfire protection in the Australian standard does allow, subject to there being a certain distance between a habitable building such as a shed and a dwelling, that the shed may not need to be constructed to the relevant bushfire attack level matter. So yes, there are those considerations under the Australian standard. Obviously, the issue here is that the relevant instrument, the local development plan, hasn't drawn any distinctions between habitable or non-habitable buildings or separation distances between habitable buildings and non-habitable buildings. It's made a blanket statement to the effect of suggesting that no structures at all should be permitted in the separation distance.
So another question then. If the building's made out of like steel and obviously made out of metal and not flammable, I think we approved one of these some time back, as I recall, Councillor Knight did one. Under what circumstances can we approve this? Because as far as I can see, everything about it is approvable apart from the fact that it might catch fire one day.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's a fair enough. What Councillor Henderson says is correct. We have approved similar sorts of non-habitable structures before. You'll recall there was one not that long ago that came to council where, subject to certain conditions and building it to a certain standard, the council was prepared to approve it, and it's open to the council to do so in this circumstance. Yes.
Okay, Mr Mayor, I'll be moving to approve, and I'll work with Mr Russell on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4.9, statutory planning decisions made under delegated authority. 5.1, construction workshop at the Midlands Men's Shed. Councillor Howlett. Questions, or are you going to do something different?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A question, first two questions. One is, was why was $152,000 sought, and was that a reasonable figure to...
Okay, I've just been reminded this item does have a confidential attachment.
Perfect. I'll just...
So if you just make sure you don't press on the... or make the question around the confidential part.
I can make the questions online directly through email, that's fine. So
Thank
then
you.
I'll probably withdraw it.
Thank you. Item 6.1, list of accounts paid, March 2022. 6.2, financial management report for period ending 31 March 2022. Item 6.3, budget adjustments 21-22 and May 2022. And I see, is that you, Councillor Bowman? Thank you. Item 6.4, change of the basis valuation. Turning the page. Item 6.5, establishment of 2 new reserves, public open space reserve, Swan View and public open... Okay, can I just finish reading the item? And review open space reserve Middle Swan. Councillor Catalano, you've got some questions.
Where are they? Where are these reserves going to be?
Sorry, Councillor Catalano?
Where are these reserves going to be located? I couldn't see them in there. Maybe I didn't read it carefully enough, but...
Cash reserve.
Yeah, I know, but I know they're in. I know there's cash reserves, but they're going to be establishing 2 new reserves, I believe, with cash in lieu.
Okay, I'm going to refer the question to Miss Lay, who's online, or try and answer your question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The use of the word reserve in context of establishing 2 new reserves means that we're setting aside money in a specific pot of money. It doesn't mean we're building a POS reserve.
Why does it say public open space reserve then? What's this for? What's the public open space?
Through you, Mr Mayor, they're specific use reserves for the purpose of applying funds for public open space related works. So they were from funds collected prior to 2006, and because of the changes to the planning regulations, the Act, we now have to set up separate financial reserves to hold that money, and those funds can be applied for public open space works.
Fine. I understand the reserve idea now, thank you, but where is the public open space in Middle Swan that this money is going to be applied to?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that can be directed from Council. It's part of the business planning process where Council can identify priorities. It can come through the asset management plans and works that have been identified where then funds could be applied for those purposes.
All right. So is this is coming out of the... Is it a DCP related to Movida Estate, is it?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, these are very old subdivisions. So there was an amount collected for a Red Gum Estate in Swanview and an amount collected for 2J Road, Middle Swan.
Okay, all right. So you've had the money for such a long time and we just haven't put in a reserve. Is that what this is about? Pardon?
Mr Mayor, the previous legislation was to hold the funds in the trust account, which
Yep.
is what the city did, but the legislation has changed.
So it's going from a trust account to a reserve account, but we don't know when or where we're going to apply the money as yet.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there are no plans at this stage, but it is something that Council can prioritise in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.6, proposed 2022-23 differential and specified area rates. And Councillor Bowman, you've withdrawn that. You've got a question, Councillor Johnson?
I have. It came to my attention today that the Australian Bureau of Statistics has just released the the latest inflation figures came out today. So as of today, the CPI is annualised CPI is 5.1%. So the question to the staff is, what impact does that have on the thinking around the budget and the rate rise? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to
Ms. Slade, you hear the question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is new information. Councillor Johnson is correct, was just released today. So our long-term financial plan has the draft budget based on a CPI of 2.75%. So this is likely going to have an increase to expenditure requirements of the city, and we will have to take another look and just factor that into our modelling. That work hasn't been completed because it was only announced today.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, you have a question?
Normally this time of year, we know every other metro local government's proposed rate increase. They all talk as well. Do we know that information, and where do we sit compared to others? So what's the average that everyone else is recommending, from the smallest to the largest as well in the metro area, please?
Mr. CEO.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't got the specific local governments by name, but what I can say that from a metropolitan perspective, the average is between 2 and 4% as an increase. There is currently one local government that is sitting at plus 4%, and one local government looking at a draft of 0, and that's ourselves.
So just so I'm correct in my understanding, there's no other metro local government that's proposing anything less than 2% except for us?
Not at this stage, Mr. Mayor.
Not
what
that
I
we're
know.
aware of.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Any other questions on that item, councillors? Thank you. Item 7.1, Annual Meeting of Electors, Motion 6, Urban Development Application of Policies. Item 7.2, Annual Meeting of Electors, Motion 11, Marketing Office to Promote Indigenous and Non-Indigenous Heritage. Item 7.3, Annual Meeting of Electors, Motion 16, Midland Central Park. Item 7.4, Annual Meeting of Electors, Motion 17, Devon Street, Woodbridge. Item 7.5, Annual Meeting of Electors, Motion 22, Rainbow Park, Bennett Springs. Item 7.6, Annual Meeting of Electors, Water Fountains in Bennett Springs. Councillor Bowman, you've withdrawn that for an alternative or for questions? Thank you. Item C 1.1, Councillor Zanino, access track off Boulognese Drive, Brigadoon. C 1.2, Councillor Howlett, the Jacobs Traffic Report. Item C 1.3, Councillor Johnson, temporary underpass, Great Eastern Highway, South Guildford.
Quick question, Mr. Mayor. I was expecting to see in here some information about an email I received from you a while ago with respect to the city's advocacy priorities, and it was about talking to the Commonwealth Government, possibly Mr. Ken White, about a temporary underpass at this location. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What happened with that? Because this is what prompted the motion.
I believe it was raised in a part of our advocacy trip to Canberra from memory, but I don't recall any other details, but I can go through my emails I've sent to you and resend it. But I just don't recall the details at the moment, Councillor Johnson.
All right, okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's correct. It was raised in conversations in Canberra, but also as part of the advocacy meetings leading up to the election in terms of quick win or shovel-ready projects, and that was mentioned as a temporary solution until main roads are ready to do a more permanent solution there.
Is that a reasonable thing to add it as a temporary solution to the advocacy priority list? And yeah,
and it is included, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And then the confidential items, councillors, which we dealt with behind closed doors. Councillor Parry, I note you've withdrawn C 3.3, and that's for an alternative.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we've got a few councillors for that one.
Councillor Howlett, do you have one? Okay, well, Councillor Parry's got his in first, so we'll deal with them in order. If you can get them into the staff and liaise with staff for all alternative motions, it's thoroughly recommended. So, any other questions, councillors? C3.1. And C3.2. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll again move for 3-minute debate times, the same thing as we did last time, as well as can Mr CEO please advise of the items that we need to go through as a matter of importance as well. And I'm sure councillors would agree that we'd like to get through those items in the first 4 hours of the meeting as well, if that's okay with you, Mr CEO and Mr Mayor.
I think if we... Thank you.
That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business before I close the agenda forum, councillors? Then I thank you for your attendance tonight, and I declare the meeting closed at 8.